And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PSBTA Technical Solutions webinar series. My name is Martha Ellis, and I'm a retired division chief from the Salt Lake City Fire Department and now serve as the executive director for the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association, or the PSBTA. If you are unfamiliar with our association, our mission is to work as a broadband end user advocate for all first responders and service providers. Today's webinar is also presented by the Public Safety Spectrum Alliance, or the PSSA, which is comprised of our nation's foremost subject matter experts on all aspects of broadband allocation, use, and optimization for first responders. It is an honor for both of our organizations to be hosting this discussion with FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr. Before we get started, I have to go over a few housekeeping items. All attendees have automatically been muted to reduce background noise. Any questions should be submitted to us directly through the questions function, which is located at the bottom of the menu on the right side of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of our panel discussion. We will attempt to answer as many questions as possible and follow up with those that we don't get to during the live portion of this webinar. An email address will also be provided, so if you have additional questions after we conclude, you can send them to us directly. Today's first responders face a very different world than our predecessors of 25 plus years ago. Our challenges are becoming more complex and compounding. Mutual and automatic aid activations requiring multidisciplinary responses and oftentimes partnerships with national level resources require a whole new level of interoperability, connectivity, and bandwidth to support successful outcomes. Since 9/11, public safety response needs have been receiving extraordinary attention and investment, which include the development of our first and only nationwide public safety network, FirstNet. Now more than ever, first responders need to have their voices heard. So thank you for taking the time to be with us for our conversation with Commissioner Carr. And Commissioner, thank you to you and your staff for making this conversation possible. As we get started, Commissioner, I would like to welcome you and ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you became an FCC Commissioner.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks to the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association and the first responder organizations that invited me to be with you here today. And I want to express my gratitude and thanks for your frontline service that you do. One of my cousins is actually a professional firefighter down in Southern Virginia. That gives me a very, very small glimpse into the work that it takes and the sacrifices that go into getting your jobs done. I mean, it's very few people that actually have life and death jobs that make a difference. A lot of people in DC think that those are their jobs, but you all are actually out there in communities across the country getting it done. So really want to express my heartfelt thanks. I try to spend as much time in this job as possible outside of DC, outside of the Beltway. I think there's no better way to learn about the segment of the economy that we regulate, to interact with public safety officials directly, than to be with them in their communities outside of DC. And so I've had the chance to visit with public safety officials all the way from Utqiagvik, Alaska, which is the northernmost community in this country, right on the Arctic Ocean, all the way down to Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. And every single time I'm just left in awe with the job that you all get done. My route to this position has been an interesting one. I'm actually from Northern Virginia myself. I went to school in this area, went to law school to specialize in telecom, went to Catholic University's program for law school after going to undergrad at Georgetown. So specialized in telecom law. It's been a couple years at a law firm, and I did a clerkship with a federal judge down in South Carolina for a year, and then came to the FCC as just a staffer back in 2012, working in the Office of General Counsel. And I thought, I really want to go to the FCC, get some public sector experience, contribute a little bit to the agency's mission, and then I assumed I would leave in a year or two, and almost 10 years later now, I'm still here. I've had a lot of really interesting experiences since I've been here. I got to work in OGC for a couple of years before working for then Commissioner Pai, and I had his public safety portfolio in addition to Spectrum and international matters as well, and really enjoyed that work. When Pai became chairman of the FCC, he made me general counsel of the agency, which was, up to that point, the best job that I'd ever have, getting to oversee the FCC's lawyers and working on a broad range of issues, and really getting to look at it through a legal lens and providing legal advice to all the commissioners in the agencies. A little while later, then President Trump nominated me to be one of the commissioners of the agency, and that took place at the end of 2017. And so I've been in this job since about August of 2017, and it's just been the privilege of a lifetime to get to be inside the FCC, working in a couple different roles, now in much more of a policy role, and getting, again, to get out of the building, talk to people and see how the work that we do can impact them. I focus a lot on wireless issues, 5G in particular. How do we get this next network built out in communities across the country? So that's mean focusing a lot on some of the permitting and approval processes that are needed to build out internet infrastructure in this country. And the truth is that we were sort of falling behind a couple years ago. Back in 2016, for instance, we put up about 708 new cell sites in this country in 2016. And that was falling behind the pace from a lot of our global counterparts. In 2019, after we engaged in some modernizing of our infrastructure rules, providers built over 46,000 new cell sites in this country. So 708 in 1 year, 2016, to over 46,000 in 2019. And that's important. And a lot of those builds were part of FirstNet, which is a build out, obviously, as you all know better than anyone, this dedicated high-speed public safety network. And the work that we do with public safety officials sort of comes up very routinely at the FCC. So it's great for me to get to spend some time, particularly here, interacting with you all and getting to know each other a little bit better.
Great. Well, thank you. And clearly, Commissioner, we are very fortunate to have you in the role and deeply appreciate your support. I am in awe of that significant difference between 1 year and the other with that build out. The infrastructure is clearly important backbone to all things that we're talking about here as far as communication. So thank you for that. I would now like to go ahead and introduce the PSSA panel members. Joining us today are retired Fire Chief Jeff Johnson, retired Police Chief Chris Moore, and Sue Swenson, who served as the chairwoman for the FirstNet Authority Board. I always like to point out that although all of our panelists have retired from their primary roles in public safety and communication, their commitment is ongoing to the success and development of all aspects of first responder communications. It's truly unwavering. So panelists, thank you as well for your ongoing investment of your subject matter expertise, historical perspective, and time to these efforts. At this time, I am going to turn the mantle over to Chief Johnson to lead us through our panel discussion with Commissioner Carr.
Well, thank you, Martha. And Commissioner, thank you so much for taking time to join public safety and our broad audience today to talk about the FCC and your impact on the telecommunications infrastructure, which is one thing that has changed in my career. I started in 1978 for a fire department, and it was all push to talk, led up to listen. And what's going on now is it's far beyond push to talk. It's about broadband telecommunications and all aspects of that, which enable push to talk in many cases. Commissioner, I think the first question gets at the heart of public safety and Martha's comment about the fact that the three of us are still involved. And that really comes from, it takes a while to kind of get the technical chops and to understand how the system works. And then once you're at that level, you have to ask yourself, how do I best serve public safety? And to that end, Commissioner, what is the best way for public safety to engage the FCC to make sure that public safety voices and perspectives are heard? We are very guilty of tend to focus on our jobs and lose the high-level policy and policy issues that affect our daily life. So if you wouldn't mind talking about who, what, and how is the best way to make sure we're heard at the FCC.
Well, thank you again, all of you for your service. I think what you're doing is the exact right thing. I think regularly hosting events and communicating with FCC officials, even if there's not a specific ask, just establishing the open channel, the free flow of communication, knowing who to talk to is a big piece of it. As I mentioned, I try to travel a lot. And so connecting with us when we're on the road, letting us, walk for a couple minutes in your shoes, do ride-alongs with you. As I mentioned, I was out before this call started. My wife's from Reno, Nevada, so I spent a lot of time last summer out in Nevada. There was obviously tremendous round of wildfires out there, and I got to see from a distance, all the firefighters going in. I was blown away by the number of aircraft that were circling, airplanes coming in, helicopters coming in, and from my mind, from the FCC, I'm thinking about all of the critical communications that's going on and taking place to make sure that all works. So I think getting a chance to see some of that in the field is really important. As you mentioned, things have just changed so much over the years. And the balance that I think we have to strike at the FCC is understanding the unique needs of public safety in terms of, reliability, durability of the physical equipment is just different than the commercial sector. And the balance we have to strike is how do we create an environment that is going to be tailor-made to the unique needs of public safety, distinct from the general consumer market, while at the same time finding ways to get the upsides of the commercial marketplace to apply to public safety. What I mean by that is things like, economies of scale, so that, how do you leverage some of the economies of scale to drive down the cost of your equipment? How do you, have dedicated spectrum that's reserved and used for you, but also how do you leverage commercial spectrum, either so that your spectrum is more affordable when you need it, that there may be economic efficiencies there. So I think that's one of the unique challenges is that, we tend historically to treat public safety very siloed. This is your spectrum, these are your devices. Interoperability has been a challenge from that perspective, but some of that is good, and we need to keep that, but we also need to think of how do we bring the benefits of commercial marketplace to bear without taking completely out of the silo and just say, you're just like any other user, you don't have a special relationship with the FCC in any way. So I think finding a way to blend that and helping us do that, is sort of the existential sort of, I don't know if it's a challenge or maybe it's the benefit going forward is merging old, unique, siloed public safety with the benefits of sort of commercial systems, and how do we make those work together while never undermining, the criticality of your missions.
Well, I love your comments, Commissioner. I mean, Sue and I saw that firsthand with how supportive the FCC was when we were trying to roll out FirstNet. I mean, because that is kind of what you're talking about explicitly, how we took a public resource in 20 megahertz of spectrum. We competitively procured a partner, and then that spectrum is shared for both commercial purposes, but public safety has ruthless preemption capability. So we serve both needs. And I also really appreciated your perspective of watching the firefighters come to work in Reno. What a lot of people miss about that is we had 25 states in Oregon, Washington, and California last year during those wildfires. 25 states drove here with their equipment and resources to help us fight those wildfires. And if you show up and you can't talk and you can't share data and you can't do a lot of things, it dramatically hampers the modern day fire attack. We really have to do that. So it was wonderful that you picked up on that and that you understand the nuances of that. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks. I mean, I got a glimpse of it. And we mentioned earlier, before we started the call, as part of my travels, I spent time in Montana. I was in Missoula with one of the smoke jumper groups there. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, they did not let me go up on an airplane and jump out, which, that's on my bucket list to do. But they did take me behind the scenes and showed me, the technology that they're using. And it's really mind-blowing now how much data goes into predicting, where the fire is, where is it going to grow to, how do we sort of come up with a plan of containment. And again, I think there's no substitute for getting out of the FCC, skipping past the layers of lawyers and lobbyists that are usually between FCC officials and public safety officials on the ground, and seeing what it is you actually do. And so I think, continuing to facilitate, those experiences, I think are really beneficial for everybody.
Well, completely agree, which is one of the benefits of the person I'm about to introduce. Sue Swenson was the chairwoman of FirstNet. She saw FirstNet from the first scrap of paper to 2 million subscribers on the network today. And Sue has got an unparalleled background as in the commercial industry, and then came to the rescue in 2012 of public safety and has stayed with us. She is a full-on adopted member of public safety. And Sue, let me turn it over to you, Sue Swenson.
Great, thank you, Chief. And Commissioner, thanks for being with us today. I too appreciated your comments about just the way spectrum can be used effectively between the commercial and public safety sectors. My whole career was in commercial wireless, and that's where I spent the predominance of my career. But the FirstNet experience really saw that there was a different way to do this to the benefit of both. And so, your appreciation of that is great. And the introduction of FirstNet, as you know, and you've probably seen firsthand, has made a huge difference in terms of how public safety views technology. I think, initially they had land mobile radio, which only allowed them to do certain things, and we as consumers had more capability than public safety. So the introduction of FirstNet has certainly caused them to see the benefits of technology. So technology, as you know, evolves pretty rapidly, and there's lots of things that are now evolving to help public safety. And I think public safety is seeing the benefit, and also the commercial side is seeing it. So understanding how evolving technology can help public safety, and how the FCC can also assist with that evolution. As you've seen most recently, a lot of activity in the FCC around enhanced location services, enhanced wireless coverage, community alerting. So I'd like your view on how we can work together in the public safety community and the FCC to advance that technology for the betterment of both public safety and the commercial side of business, if you have a view on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things going on in that space. I mean, you mentioned a little bit there about location accuracy, and that's such an interesting one. For years we've had in place, basically longitude requirements, XY requirements, and we've been working over time to tighten those. I think that's good. About a year or so ago, we started on the path of finalizing rule for a Z-axis for a vertical location. It's interesting, that one is one where in principle, everybody is in agreement. We want, vertical location. There are some forks in the road in the FCC about how exactly do you do that? Do you do this, height above ground level? Do you do sort of building floor? Which is generally better? Which is better in the sense that it could be done faster, which would get built out faster? So, we worked through the details of that, and different commissioners came down in different places. I tended to line up more with the height above ground level approach. One, because I think it could be rolled out quickly. Two, because it would work not just in buildings, but if you're in rocky terrain or something like that, that could help you understand where you need to go above ground level. And for another, you can be in a situation where either in a building collapse, floor levels don't mean anything to you, or for instance, in this DC area, for instance, you can go into a building and it's like it's just numbered oddly. And so if someone says go to floor 2, you may not know immediately, either generally or in a disorienting environment, is 2 up or is 2 down. But sometimes height above ground level can be better with that. People disagreed reasonably with that approach, and they thought we should go in a different direction. And I, respect those views and understand them. That was just one fork in the road. But generally, I think we're headed in the right direction with trying to tighten down, X, Y, adding Z, because you're right. There's all kinds of interesting new technologies that are coming online that we need to help, facilitate.
Right, and I appreciate your comment about the issue of scale, because I think previously public safety, had some limitations in terms of what was available to them. And as you know, through FirstNet and open standards, we've been able to, I think there's probably close to 200 devices available to public safety at very reasonable prices. So as we move forward, obviously it feels like the FCC is looking at that much more significantly in terms of looking at the opportunity to use scale and use the commercial basis to make sure that we don't go backwards in time, and make sure that public safety has access just like we as consumers. Sounds like that's the direction the FCC is going.
Yeah, it's a great trend line, and we're making progress. We need to continue to. I was in Louisville, Kentucky maybe a year or two ago, and I got a chance to spend time with the sort of the air unit of the local police departments. They took me up on one of their police helicopters and got to spend about an hour with them on a patrol up there. And they were telling me that basically what they've been doing is taking their iPhones, putting it on FaceTime, connecting with an officer on the ground, and using the FaceTime function to show them, the video feed from the helicopter. And like, kudos to them for making that work. But obviously, that's not the position that we want to put public safety in. Is using, personal cell phones, FaceTime with officers on the ground to give them the perspective from the helicopter. So I think it's a good thing that we're, changing things up, giving some different options, because again, kudos to them for making it work, but duct tape and baling wire is not the position that we need to be putting public safety in.
Yeah, we appreciate your perspective on that and continuing down that path, and we appreciate the opportunity to engage with you and the other commissioners on what's important for public safety. Only when you have the information, it's going to make your job much more effective in terms of understanding what the needs out there. So appreciate your engagement on that. So with that, Jeff, I think I'm going to turn it over to Chief Moore to ask a question of the commissioner, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Chris, let me introduce you, please. Chris Moore, retired as the police chief in San Jose after an awesome career. And then Chris was the leader of the Public Safety Alliance, which led the legislative effort, Commissioner, on Capitol Hill to allocate the D block, which became FirstNet. And Chris is one of the most humble public servants you'll ever meet, and certainly one of the brightest. Chris, thanks for your continued service, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Sue. Commissioner, let me add my thanks to your presence here today. It's really an honor for the folks in public safety to get to hear a little about your background, what your interests are, and how we can work together to strengthen public safety communications. I do love the fact that people are willing to go boots on the ground to go find out what the real ground truth is with communications. You will find, and I have to say this, that firefighters tend to be more creative than cops because they have a lot more time than we do. I'll just say that up front. But to be able to come up with those types of solutions to solve problems that exist today, at the same time, I think we owe them better, that we can actually give them sort of what the commercial sector gets, and do so in a fashion that is affordable for their budgets. And speaking of budgets, it's always going to be difficult. And so when Sue talks about scale, I completely agree, and grateful for your commentary about how do we find scale. And the way we do that, as we've found with FirstNet, is to be able to merge the technologies of the commercial sector with the needs of public safety. And I think we've done that, and really appreciate your support of FirstNet as it continues to grow and continues to serve public safety. So with that money question in mind, and just your forward thinking on public safety, in your perfect world, specifically with respect to public safety, but generally for the FCC, in what ways do you think, or what do you think the path is to help public safety? What initiatives do you really see coming forward, in the next several years that public safety should be thinking about? Those that we're already working on, some that we may not even have thought of, to include the things of aviation that you've mentioned already several times on the call, which I really appreciate. And I do appreciate the fact that you were hanging out with the police officers, not just the firefighters. They cook more than we do. They feed you better, but we'll take care of it, make sure you're safe. With that, I'll just
yeah. That's your best?
Yeah. Sure.
Exactly right. Well, I think there's a couple things coming down the pipe. I mean, one thing is we need to continue to build out, infrastructure for public safety. And so I think we made a lot of progress, as I mentioned, over the last couple of years with cutting red tape to make it easier to build those facilities. I mentioned the number of cell towers that have gone up. I was in New Mexico along the border with some state agencies when they were putting up a new communications facility out there to help them with their work. So I think there's more that we need to continue to do to make it easier to build facilities and to ensure that our existing facilities are robust. I'm a little worried there could be some retrenchment on that. There's a lot of interest groups that, there's various NIMBYism style theories about wanting to make it harder for various reasons to build infrastructure. I think that's not a good direction for the country. So I'm a little worried there'll be some backtracking there. So hopefully we can stay on track with what we've done the last couple of years in terms of making it easier to build infrastructure. I mean, again, you can be in places where there's no cell service, and that's bad for, needing to call 911 in a car accident or whatnot. So we got to continue to close those gaps up. We're continuing to put more spectrum online. I think that's a really good thing. And it seems to me that the private sector is being more responsive slowly to the needs of public safety officials. So as we get that spectrum out there. There can be opportunities for public safety users as well. And then again, making sure that we're adopting, requirements for devices, whether it's interoperability requirements, so that doesn't sort of continue to be a long-term challenge.
Appreciate that. With just one quick follow-up, Jeff, if I may, just some thoughts on 911, next gen 911, and what's coming up, and your views on that would be really nice to hear.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the midst, obviously, of this broader transition to NG 911, and for the most part, a lot of that challenge has been funding at the state level. There's been some 911 fee diversion, which some of my colleagues have focused a lot on. That is a problem, but closing that gap, which is necessary, won't get us all the funding we need for the NG 911 transition. Maybe there'll be funding in some of these infrastructure efforts that are underway in Congress, and obviously I think public safety should stay plugged in those discussions to see if there's room for getting NG 911 across the finish line. We're looking at a lot of other 911 issues, including the work we've already done on text to 911. I know there's a lot of concern when that was first rolled out a couple of years ago. Is it going to overwhelm PSAPs? The experiences I've seen from talking with public safety officials is that it hasn't. Now, it's not available nationwide yet. It's sort of PSAP by PSAP, but that seems to be going well. And so we're looking at different ways, including this week, we're starting a process to look at whether people should be able to text 988, which is sort of a dedicated line for mental health counseling.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Sue, would you mind engaging the commissioner on, you and I talk often about not stranding technology. As the commissioner points out, it's about, how you leverage the strength of the commercial sector and serve public safety in a way they need to be served. And as we often talk about inspiring the manufacturing community to build devices and not stranding the last investment we made. I mean, it's always a challenge. Do you mind reflecting on that a bit?
Yeah, no, it's obviously an ongoing challenge as technology evolves, and it's just making sure that there's continuity of that technology from generation to generation, and making sure that it's not stranded. I mean, I think you've seen probably a lot of that, Commissioner, over the years, and just would appreciate any views you have on things that the industry or with the commission we could be thinking about, or things that the industry could be doing to make sure that doesn't happen, and that's considered. I mean, I know for some companies, moving on to new technology means more business, leaving the other behind. But obviously, that's a problem for people who don't have the wherewithal to, pay for this, for continued upgrades and stranding of the old. I don't know if you have any particular views on that.
Yeah, we need to be sensitive, obviously, to this concept of tech transitions. We deal with it a lot on the commercial side. And I think there's some lessons learned from the commercial side, but also I think you can, there are points at which the analogy breaks down. So for instance, on the commercial wireless, mobile wireless side, consumers have gone from 2G to 3G to 4G to now 5G, and carriers are turning off, 2G networks, 3G networks. And we've tried to give them, relative carte blanche to do that because it lets them get the new spectrum for 5G, but it involves, swapping out handsets. And you have customers that, carriers that offer all their customers basically free handsets at some point in time, usually to facilitate that transition. But some of those dynamics don't, carry over as well into the public safety space where there's longer term investments, budgeting at the state level. So we got to, play that balance there between making sure public safety has access to, next gen, but not sort of undermining investment cycles as well.
Great, appreciate that.
Chris, if you wouldn't mind, we all have a friend that was key to the D-Block initiative, Chief Chuck Dowd from NYPD. Chief Dowd always said, public safety will not use anything that doesn't work all the time, right? You have to be able to rely on it. Chief, would you mind reflecting on engaging the commissioner on in-building coverage and how that affects us, and maybe talking about some visions we have for that?
Sure. Just a little bit of brief background. When you talk to anybody that's worn the uniform, has been out serving the public, they don't really care what brand it is. They really don't care, about certain features. They just want it to work when they need it, where they need it, period, end of story. And as they become more savvy, carrying commercial devices and whatnot into these environments, you come down and say, well, look, I can get on my commercial device I can find where I am someplace in a building, and we get past this lat long. There's building collapses. We have chasing active shooters that we saw in the Navy Yard and stuff. Being able to identify where a threat is or where the officers are have been really, it's been critical to us. And I know you've already addressed a little, the notation of the Z-axis on trying to isolate and find people. I'll say this though, that we're always looking for that. To answer to questions is, will it work when I need it, where I need it, no matter where it is? And again, we don't know the answers to these questions, but we know the questions to ask, and we rely upon the experts, and the FCC has been a great help in helping focus the discussion. But I'd be curious from your perspective, what could, in fact, the Public Safety Homeland Security Bureau or other bureaus within the commission that could help address that particular issue? Is we need to find our people and we need to know where problems are. And we now are getting to the point where we have the technology to do it. We just haven't been able to put it together.
You know, one thing that reminds me of is this general trend that we're seeing in technology in general. So up to now, a lot of the public safety devices have been bespoke, or what I would call bespoke, and what I would call vertically integrated between the device manufacturer and the software, right? You buy one thing and it sort of performs, almost a standalone one function. You got this other device that performs this other function. You can end up with 3 or 4 of these bespoke devices. And obviously where the commercial world is going is towards, basically it's a disaggregation. And if you think about it, I'll give you an example on the tower side. So it used to be that you would buy one piece of hardware and it would come with the software, it would go on the tower, and that's what you would use. It would be relatively expensive and it wouldn't communicate well with other vertically integrated pieces of hardware on another tower. And where that industry is going is, it's called ORAN, or sort of virtualized, which means the hardware itself becomes, to put it sort of directly, becomes a dumber, cheaper piece of hardware. In the brains is the software layer. And so you can do a lot more with one device with sophisticated software than you can do with, in some cases, one piece of hardware that is vertically integrated with the software. So that disaggregation of the hardware from the software, which we saw that in the PC market in the 80s and 90s, we are now starting to see that in the sort of network infrastructure on the tower side. I think tracking that trend line into personal public safety devices would be beneficial as well. How do we encourage that so that the device stays durable and relatively cost efficient, but we get higher performance software on it? Again, that one device can then do multiple things rather than needing to carry 3 or 4 different types of radios and devices on you.
Great. That's perfect. Thank you very much for that.
Commissioner, a little bit of a setup on the topic of common operating picture. In the Department of Defense, they've done a fabulous job with their leveraging DARPA's work historically into creating a common operating picture. And that's something we strive in public safety community to achieve. And it seems like every time we try to do that, we run into this stream of information has this proprietary tag, this one has a different one, and every one of those comes with a bill. And public safety is trying to solve their common operating picture problem and solve it on a nationwide basis. And we're also trying to do so with as few payments for uniqueness that we can possibly achieve. So I don't know if you have a perspective on what we in public safety should be doing to help inspire a single common operating platform, and how we avoid kind of a separate massive charge for every one of those streams we attach to our picture. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think this is very similar to what we were just talking about. The proprietary nature of a lot of these devices. I think it can tend to hold back performance of the devices for public safety. Obviously, as you noted, it can increase the charges. So as we continue to move into this world of allowing public safety to leverage commercial devices, commercial spectrum, we're bringing more and more competition. I think the natural thrust of that is going to be to disrupt the proprietary nature of a lot of these operations and move it to interoperable devices. And again, if you can get to a point in which there's more competition at the software level, basically the operating systems, I think that's where you're gonna have a lot more choices where you don't have line item charges for every piece of proprietary data that you're pulling and using.
The easiest example, that was a great answer. One of the best examples I like to pull on this is OnStar. OnStar has been a fabulous service if you own a General Motors product. And what we get today in our public safety answering points is a motor vehicle accident at a certain address. But we know that OnStar knows far more about that vehicle. They know how fast it was going, how many G-force it impacted, whether it's on its top or its wheels, whether the motor's running or not. And they know based on seat switches how many occupants there were. And that completely changes the response that Chief Moore or I would send if we think it's a 5-mile-an-hour rush hour bumper-to-bumper thing, or it's an 80-mile-an-hour end-over-end motor vehicle crash. That even if there aren't proprietary approaches, it's almost like we haven't found in public safety the right incentives to take these things that work well and fully integrate them into how we think about our profession. I don't know if that makes any sense to you or not, but it's a real life example. If you had any comments, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues here next.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. I think part of the answer is, getting more competitors on the service provider side into the market. I mean, OnStar is there, but how do we, as we move into connected cars generally, and they got 5G on them, so you get more service providers that are connecting into the car, and then you can go to OnStar and you can say, look, I could go to this vendor and they can give me the same data. Having that competition is how you are going to drive down the costs of service for these devices. I think you can see with FirstNet. FirstNet is competing for business, but it's competing with Verizon and others as well. And at the end of the day, that competition is going to give you a lot better price and options than if there's just a monopoly provider. I think up to now, again, there's been some really good public safety vendors out there, but the more competition we get, I think you're going to get more multifunction devices, providing you more information for lower costs. So as we move forward, we got to be careful that we don't, move in a way that's going to lock in, one vendor's advantage.
So, please.
Chief, I have a question for the commissioner. It's kind of along those lines, because to me, it's the pushing of data from, the provider to the public safety agency that needs that data. One of the things we looked at initially, Commissioner, at FirstNet was, the aggregation of all that data out there that exists between law enforcement, fire community, and perhaps EMTs. I don't know if you have any views on, that's a real challenging area. And, the having access to that, everybody owns their own data and are reluctant to share it. And so I don't know if you have any particular views. I didn't have an answer. So, you're much more involved in it than I ever was. But I think that's so important for public safety, is that mixing of that data, having access to it, and giving access to those only who should have it. Obviously, that's a big deal. And I think that is part of the reluctance of, spent a lot of time at NYPD with Chief Dowd's staff, and they said, yeah, we'd like to get this information, but people on the other side are reluctant to share it. So I think that's really sort of the next frontier to make public safety much more effective, but love your perspective on that.
It's a challenge. I think you nailed it. We see this in a lot of contexts, which is, the data is there, the data exists, but there's concerns with sharing it. Sometimes it's business reasons. Sometimes it's just, it's sensitive data and people think there's liability. We see this, for instance, on the network outage side of the house. So at the FCC, we collect a lot of information about when service and 911 call centers are down. And there's been a hesitancy, including by me over the years, to open up that data even to sort of local officials, because every time someone else gets access to it, it's a potential entryway for hacking or potential opportunity for sort of misuse. But we've gone forward, I think, in the last month or so with seeking comment on how do we open that data up. So I think it's a combination of sometimes it's business interests, sometimes it's just, this is like, really important data, and the more people have access to it, it's just more entry points for things to go wrong. But I think we're at least making baby steps in the right direction, trying to open some of that up.
No, I want to commend you and the rest of the commission for doing that. To me, it's like dropping a pebble in the lake. You start out with the small concentric circles, and then you go out to the more challenging ones. So you start small, see how it works, and then expand from there. So I appreciate the work that the FCC is doing there. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So Jeff, if you would mind, I'd like to sort of pull the thread a little bit further on the commissioner's comments about connected cars and the technology behind it, because it really is. It's been fascinating to watch out here in the Bay Area, where you see a lot of these cars driving around with nobody in them. And look, they're getting there. They really are. And it's going to have a tremendous impact, not only on the economy, but it's also going to have an impact on public safety, on how do you police those roads. And public safety has been involved in the discussions, but I was curious to see from the commission standpoint, what can you do to make sure, you've got trucks, you've got cars, they're going to be transporting people and things in a completely different way that I can't fathom, but I know it's going to happen. I know you guys are thinking about it. You want to comment on any of that?
Absolutely. Well, I've got 3 kids, 3 boys, a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, an 18-month-old, and someone told me that not a single one of my kids is ever going to have a driver's license. That they have that much faith in connected cars and autonomous vehicles getting out there and getting on the road in the next couple of years. I tend to be pretty optimistic when it comes to technology, but there's still some challenges that remain to get connected cars fully across the finish line, and part of it is just people's bias, right? We've got 40,000 roughly highway deaths a year, and whenever there's an issue with a connected car or an autonomous vehicle, it's sort of headline level stuff, and I think people have a hard time making, well, this is a broader point maybe about COVID as well, making sort of risk assessments. But again, when you start with the 40,000, how do we drive that number to 0? I think we need to move pretty quickly and pretty boldly towards connected cars. And the FCC has a role in making sure that the spectrum is available. We took some action on this CV to X proceeding. We looked at the 5.9 gigahertz band, which had been dedicated public safety spectrum for vehicles for decades, but it really was never materializing, and frankly, it did not have a very great future in terms of its ability to materialize. So we opened that up to more sort of robust operations, including CVDX. So I think there's a lot we can do on the spectrum side to try to ensure that this trend towards connected cars is one that we can realize in this country as soon as possible.
Commissioner, Chief Moore and I, we have interesting conversations, and there's always the police versus firefighters element to it, which is a lot of fun for both of us. But, I remember one conversation he and I were having about if you have a self-driving car, and then the topic is looking beyond what most people look at, right? So if you have a self-driving car, how do the police write a ticket to a car that ran a stop sign and I was actually in the passenger seat? And then what happens to policing when you don't have criminal fines and assessments flowing from traffic tickets, et cetera, et cetera? It's only to wet your whistle, as it were, to what is it that we're not thinking about that is over the horizon on policy issues that are byproducts of some of the technology decisions we're making. What kind of things do you think about in that regard that we might be missing?
Well, I think we've nailed all of it. I think you guys have your finger on the pulse. I do think there is going to be an increasing convergence between commercial services and public safety services going forward. I think the idea that there's going to be 10, 15-year contracts to maintain particular bespoke pieces of equipment. I think you're going to see less of that rather than more of that going forward with this convergence. I think you're going to see sort of devices sort of consolidating from multiple ones to single ones that are going to perform multiple different functions. So I think all of that is going to be what the future holds. And again, I think the advocacy balance is making sure people are aware, yep, we want to leverage the upside of commercial, but you got to remember there's some unique things about public safety that we need to preserve as this convergence takes place.
Well, thank you. Chief Moore, if you think about our early days of FirstNet and we were contemplating the law when it was the D-block conversation and dealing with visionaries like Chief McEwen, et cetera, one of the issues was always push to talk over the network and just kind of rethinking the land mobile radio discussion. Ben dropped us a note asking a question about push to talk over LTE. Do you mind framing up a question for the commissioner on push to talk over LTE and essentially where that takes us?
Certainly. So, Commissioner, as you know, having worked in this in public safety for so long, I've had every iteration of radio from not having one to some very, very quality devices, but very expensive devices. And at the same time, it's always about land mobile radio with different spectrums and different, all of the issues that came up that we tried to address in FirstNet, we foresaw and we believe and we know that does exist, sort of mission critical push to talk, whatever that definition would be. And again, when we were thinking about this, is we know it's out there and we know the technology is there. We've been waiting on standards. We just see what your comment is on the growth of that, or the acceleration, or the path toward we get to where we have what is now truly mission critical push to talk. So it's very similar, analogous to being able to take a land mobile radio, push the button and talk, but doing it through a different path that oftentimes goes to your scale argument. You can do it for a whole lot less money with the technology that's now there. Just more about timing and what your thoughts are about that transition from traditional land mobile radio to mission critical push to talk.
Yeah, well, I think, long term, I think the vision is, and this is something that public safety obviously needs to sort of take the lead on and work through, and the FCC participate in. But, where do we want to land, 10 years from now, and how do we work towards that? How do we get, again, I'm open to being corrected and being told I'm wrong, but my vision would be, how do we get to, down to sort of, the minimal number of devices, right? Ideally, sort of one device that is going to have the cross functionality you talked about, that can use different spectrum bands, that can use different technologies, that's going to be robust so that, if it gets dropped or thrown, it's going to continue to work. And so I think, again, I'm open to sort of being told like, well, no, we need 2, we need 3. But I mean, I think long term, we should come up with a vision for, a unified device that's going to work on different bands, different technologies, and try to drive our way towards that, that sort of 10-year out goal.
I appreciate that. It's funny because when we talk to some of the vendors, obviously they have a commercial interest in this, and our intention is not to say that, we pick winners and losers. That's not it. The idea is just we understand our problem. How do we get the vendors together so that they come up with something that actually fits what we're needing, rather than being told by vendors what you should have or what you're going to get. And so I want to be really clear to those who are listening, who represent the vendor community. This is not about, icing somebody out of something. This is coming together to get us what we need. And it's a hard conversation. And we've had it before. People think their ox is going to be gored and they don't want to participate. So I think there's a bigger discussion to be had.
Yeah.
Chief, we in public safety, we make fun of one particular vendor that would bring you the solution and tell you why it solves your problem, but never ask you what the problems are you need to solve. And I think so it's always a struggle, right? Here's the answer, and they never get to asking us what was our question. And I think that's what's occurring in the technology field, caused by some of the work that Sue has done with FirstNet and creating a very receptive conversation and a roadmap that tells people where we're going. How would you suggest, and I'm about to turn this over to Martha Ellis, our moderator, but just kind of my last probe is, how would you suggest that public safety poses the right questions? And how do they get them into a forum that's meaningful? Because these people are just doing their jobs, and they don't have the nuance that maybe a company that had a half dozen lobbyists or people work in the regulatory process. And what are your thoughts on that, Commissioner, before I turn it over to Martha?
One option is to, put together some sort of, document, call it sort of, public safety 2025 or public safety 2030, and sort of stepping back from, technologies and devices and sort of thinking about, functionality, thinking about how you want, the day in the life of a, public safety official to look. I want to be able to, have this functionality. I want something, that does this, and sort of just getting rid of entirely, what is the existing devices? What are the existing, technologies, what is my sort of vision for 25, 2030 for public safety, and then sort of, introducing that, getting that out there, and sort of working off of that document, that vision to make sure that the technology then sort of, comes and meets you where you want to be.
Well, Commissioner, just thank you for creating the kind of environment you create at the FCC. Your staff, when we reached out to them, said absolutely the commissioner will want to have a conversation with public safety. The fact that you have been very open and assertive about engaging the public safety community, this is very meaningful to our colleagues and us, and thank you for that. At this point, I'll turn it over to Chief Martha Ellis, our moderator. Martha.
Oh, thank you. And Commissioner, that last comment you made really resonated with me, because I love that, right? We're looking at what do we want to look like 5, 10 years down the road. That's the messaging we should be giving to the vendors so they can start building what we need to solve those problems and be as efficient and high functioning and have that level of situational awareness that we really, really need to be more effective in the future. So thank you very much. I really love that comment. I think we have time for just a couple of questions. Commissioner, one of the things that came in is, are you aware of any spectrum issues that public safety community should be watching to make sure that it has a stake in any future technology that might be surrounding that issue?
Obviously, almost every spectrum band I think is important. We've got 3.5 out there right now, which is CBRS, relatively low power. I've put out the idea that we should revisit that band and look at upping the power in that band. That may or may not make it more attractive for public safety users. There's spectrum in the 2.5 gigahertz band that we have licenses in sort of FCC inventory that I think we need to auction that spectrum out there. I'd assume the commercial actors would be the ones that would go for that spectrum in the first place, but there could be some opportunity there. Obviously, we issued some decisions on 4.9 in the last year or so, where we tried to allow some market forces to be brought to bear on sort of traditionally public safety spectrum there. So they continue to follow that proceeding is going to be important.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another important question. Did anybody of the panelists want to add to anything on that question? Okay, thank you. Another question that came in light of some of our recent events with weather incidences and also the purposeful attacks that we've suffered recently. What are your thoughts on these types of attacks and these types of situations that take our systems out? And is there anything else that the FCC can be doing to help manage some of the devastating impacts of either a purposeful attack and or weather emergencies, such as recent weather storms that adversely impact the wireless communications?
Yeah, we need to obviously make sure that we have robust, resilient networks, not really in the public safety sphere per se, but we've been taking action to limit and exclude Huawei, ZTE, and other gear from our networks based on national security threats. I think different federal regimes have been prohibiting various federal entities and public safety officials from using that equipment anyways. But we do continue to allow some of that same Huawei and ZTE gear into our networks if it's purchased with private sector funds. And I've flagged that in the last week or so as being sort of highly problematic. That the risk that comes from Huawei and ZTE in our networks is not because of the source of funding used to purchase it, but it's the fact of that equipment in our networks at all. So I've called on the FCC to look at using our authority over equipment approvals to deny the ability to insert into any network equipment that we've deemed as a national security threat when purchased with federal dollars. So I think taking that step would go even further in ensuring the security of our network, particularly as it comes to foreign actors.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Did anybody want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay,
great. FCC is doing the right thing there. Thank you, Commissioner.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think I have time for just one more question. In your view, what is the biggest challenge that the FCC faces as it relates to public safety issues?
I still think the biggest one that we face is, is what we talked about really, which is how do we ensure the robust, resilient, works every time, in different conditions with the upside that comes from the commercial marketplace, and how do we take, the good of both and sort of blend them together, and we don't end up with, bespoke public safety devices, but they're expensive, and they, work on, few networks and with sort of limited functionality. So I think that blending, which comes up almost in every proceeding, I think will increasingly so. I think it's going to be the one of the main challenges going forward.
Fantastic. All right, at this time, I am just going to give each of you an opportunity for some closing comments. Chief, I'm going to start with you and work across my screen until I get to the commissioner. So Chief Johnson, closing comments.
Thank you. Commissioner, thank you for being accessible and available to public safety. We appreciate that you tune an ear toward public safety. We are not structured in a way where we can be everywhere all the time the way some people can. And that requires that our leaders in positions of power and authority have an ear tuned to us, and you've demonstrated that you are that. Thank you. Sue?
Yeah, Commissioner, I appreciate hearing your background and just how you became a commissioner. I was not aware of that, and I was confident in you before, but I'm ever more confident as a result of hearing that. And like Chief Johnson and Chief Moore, appreciate your connection to public safety and your willingness to get out. I grew up in mostly operational roles, and that's how you find out what needs to be done, and certainly informs what you do as a result of that engagement. So applaud you for that, and appreciate the openness of you and your staff. Very much appreciated. We will continue to engage with you as appropriate to keep you informed, and hopefully working together we'll do the best for whoever the particular audiences are. Thanks for participating today.
Thanks.
Chief Moore?
Commissioner, I just want to say again, thank you, and echo some comments that Chief Johnson just made about public safety folks tend to be really operational. They're boots on the ground. They're trying to solve problems in the real time, day after day after day. So we sometimes don't take the longer view, and really appreciate it when those who recognize those issues and flag them for us, and you've done that. And the way I know that's true is because you've physically been on the ground and listened and watched and see how people do their jobs and come up with ideas that, again, you can suggest to those of us that are in the field that we haven't thought of before. So we're very grateful for your time. We're grateful for your expertise and your interest in public safety. And I hope for those who are listening to this broadcast that they're appreciative of the work that you've done on behalf of public safety. Sometimes the commissioners don't get the credit that they deserve for all of the things that they do, covering all aspects of society and our culture. So for that, I thank you very much, and thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you all to you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. This was a great event. I'm glad you all reached out, and as I again get out of DC, I'll look to connect with your friends and members. And Jeff, I know you're on a long overdue vacation, so we should probably let you get back to enjoying that. But thanks for taking some time out of that to join for the event.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all, and particularly thank you, Commissioner. I too mirror what Sue said, and Chris, frankly, I mean, the fact that you're out and making these visits and want to jump out of an airplane out there in Missoula, I think that's extremely commendable, and it's authentic, and we love that. So again, thank you all. We really hope everybody enjoyed the webinar today and really felt that it was time well spent. And a heartfelt thank you to you, Commissioner Carr, and our PSSA panelists. We deeply appreciate everyone's participation. Again, we are the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association, and we want to be your advocate for all aspects of broadband utilization. By being here today, you help support our efforts to continually bring you cutting-edge information about all aspects of broadband use for first responders, as well as the ecosystem, which is being purpose-built for your advantage. If you'd like to visit our webpage, you can find us at thepsbta.org. There you will find more information about our association, our upcoming webinars, and recordings of all of our previous webinars. In appreciation for your attendance today, you will receive a free membership to our association for 2021. You'll receive a discount code in and follow-up email, which you can use at checkout and registration. Finally, consider visiting allthingsfirstnet.com as well. Their team continually compiles valuable information on FirstNet and its developing ecosystem. This concludes our discussion with FCC Commissioner Carr. Thank you again for your time. Be safe.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.